Greetings once again, everyone, and welcome to the Spirit Side. I'm Paul James Caden, and today on the show we are going to be talking about Alex Jones and Glenn Beck, the Godfathers of the Truther movement. And this was a show after I put Monday's podcast out entitled COVID vaccines and mask mandates, are they part of an agenda? I really thought about this, that I probably should have made mention of it in that show. The two TV media personalities, Alex Jones and Glenn Beck, that really started this snowball rolling down the hill. And I debated maybe doing another show this week, which here I am doing, but I was really encouraged by the overwhelming response to Monday's show. People sharing their thoughts, their concerns, their spiritual concerns over this division we have through this truther and woke community that believes everything we're being told is a lie. So things have been really busy, as I said in Monday's show, but I really wanted to carve out a little time to do this episode, a secondary show this week, because I think it's important. And, we have to talk about Alex Jones and Glenn Beck. And, also a lot of the folks at Fox News. There was Bill O'Reilly, Sean Hannity, a lot of those folks that were kind of in the shadow, the up and coming, maybe, second in command under the Alex Joneses and the Glenn Becks. But, a lot of people probably don't even remember or put the pieces together. How I talked about in Monday's show that a lot of this truther community came out of the old satanic panic of the 1980s and through the 1990s, where the fundamentalist Christian groups are always looking for the end of the world and looking for the Antichrist everywhere. Satan was in our music, he was in our movies, he was in our books. He was in Washington, he was in Hollywood, he was everywhere. You could seldom do anything or go anywhere outside of the church that was not influenced by Satan in some way to get you off the path of faith, make you lose your salvation, and, inevitably land you in hell when you died. And we talked about how a lot of people leaving this movement were lost and wondering for a while, but then they began to form their own religious opinions. And a lot of them were still quite apocalyptic. You would meet some of these people, out in public, or, a lot of them on the internet, and they said they renounced organized religion and the televangelists and evangelicalism and fundamentalism, but they were still very much espousing a lot of the doctrines, a lot of the beliefs, a lot of the things that they were taught in those movements. And little by little, we got these fringe groups who started looking for the devil in a different aspect than they were looking for him in the satanic panic, playing records backwards and, saying that Kiss and Led Zeppelin and the Beatles and all these rock bands had satanic messages playing backwards on their records. There was all kind of crazy things that they did. And so we had a number of these people that, started getting into some of the conspiracy theories, especially about 9/11 and some of the others that are out there, and asking questions. and they still kind of married to the idea that, well, the government's crooked, the government is no good. And then it started to carry over into this notion, well, yes, there are a bunch of Satanists and Freemasons in the government and in Hollywood, and all the places that they claimed were demonically infested during the Satanic Panic. The new breed of Christian who left all of that and started searching for their own answers, their own truth, the new place that they would fit in. They kind of flipped that a little bit and started talking about, well, it may not necessarily be demonically infested the way they said it was in the Satanic Panic of the 1980s and the 1990s, but yes, it's still satanic. These people belong to secret societies. They're Satan worshipers. They're witches. They brought that notion with them, and I'm not saying that that's completely untrue, because there are people, in government and Hollywood and entertainment and high places who have some very bizarre beliefs about themselves, about who and what God is, and about the world that we live in. But then on top of all of this came the advent of Alex Jones and Glenn Beck. And these were individuals who came into our living rooms just about every weeknight. I think Glenn Beck was on Monday through Friday at one point. I watched him for a little while because my father was really into him at the time. And my wife and I heard several people say, "Oh my God, you got to watch Glenn Beck. Do you watch Glenn Beck? He's so amazing." And he was saying all this stuff about the government and George Soros and Barack Obama, and how everything was so orchestrated to bring us into a form of socialism here in America. Now, again, I don't deny that that is untrue, and I don't deny that there are people who want the globalist government, a global form of socialism with the few in charge of everything. But there were also some other things that were kind of strange, and I heard, these individuals, much like today's QAnon and, other conspiracy theorists who make predictions of what's going to happen, and, you better be careful, you better be prepared. And I heard Glenn Beck especially say things, I think it was in the summer of 2009 or 2010, somewhere in that ballpark, where he was saying by the fall or the winter of that year, a Hershey's candy bar was going to cost you $7.50 or something of this nature, because of the plan that the elitists had, that the socialists had, that Obama and his cohorts had, and all of these prices were going to go up. Like a loaf of bread was going to cost something like, close to $20, and everything was going to be so skyrocketed that you wouldn't even be able to buy groceries. And Glenn Beck, being a Mormon, he's talking about storing up, at least 2 years worth of food in case of these emergencies. He has his, his food storage area in his home. And, I saw these things, these dates that Glenn Beck mentioned. And there were quite a few. I don't remember them all. I remember the major price hike that was supposed to happen. I remember a couple of times he talked about in the springtime. I mean, a lot of these kind of folks always seem to like the month of April. And I recall him saying one time, by April of, next year, we're going to have this, national ID, and it's going to turn into a global ID, and it's going to turn into the chip, and all this type of thing. I remember him talking about that, and those dates came and went, and they didn't happen. I remember Glenn Beck and Alex Jones, sounding the alarm that the Obama administration was getting ready to launch this mass campaign where they were going to start going door to door, the police and the military, and collecting guns from the private citizens. The days of being able to own firearms was over. They were going to come and start collecting them door to door, and you wouldn't be able to buy them anymore. So again, these dates, these seasons came and went, and eventually these people fell out of popularity, fell out of favor. You don't hear as much about them anymore. But one of the other things that I did notice about Glenn Beck and Alex Jones, and what made me stop and say, I'm just not going to watch this anymore, because I think it's part truth of what's going on behind the scenes with some of these people, but it's also a lot of bunk and a lot of fear tactics. And I told my wife, I said, I've seen several things now that he said was going to happen, and they didn't happen. And he really put out a lot of fear about this. Those people that tuned into Glenn Beck and Alex Jones, and they would hear these kinds of predictions, they were all, oh my God, they were really braced and waiting, for that, that crap storm to come, whatever it was going to be. But I also told my wife, I said, not only did I see them uh, talk about these things that never happened, but it also strikes me as being very much like watching the televangelists. Of course, Glenn Beck and Alex Jones brought a lot of mention of God and Jesus and the Bible and the Book of Mormon and being a believer and, all of this type of thing. They would make allusions to the end time. I remember one time Glenn Beck did a whole series on his show. I think when he was on Fox News, I think he was on for a while. He did a whole week's show on the Tower of Babel and what the modern day Tower of Babel is and what it would become. And, I told my wife, I said, I feel like the old days of sitting watching the televangelists. It's religion mixed with fear, mixed with, the end of days. Oh, you better be careful, better make sure you're saved, better make sure you have Jesus in your life. Now it's, better make sure you have guns, better make sure you have Jesus and God, and better make sure you have food stored up, and whatever else they were telling you to do to prepare. And just as I was getting ready to stop watching Glenn Beck, I was really taken back when he had this big meeting in Washington, or it was some kind of big rally. I don't remember what it was called. And my jaw just really hit the ground. I remember looking at my wife and saying, "Oh my God, are you kidding me with this?" Because he not only began to sound more and more like a televangelist, but at his meeting, his whatever it was he held in Washington D.C., I believe it was, he had many well-known televangelists up there preaching and speaking with him. I know there was John Hagee among some of the others, and I said, "There you go." It almost seems like he's paving his way to be a part of that, or to become one of them. Like, maybe in a year's time we'll see Glenn Beck on the Trinity Broadcasting Network with his own end time show. It was really bizarre, and my feelings about it were absolutely correct. So that was enough of it for me. But in the meantime, I say all that to point out the fact that this really was the match that lit the fuse, especially in America. Now, those people that came out of organized religion, those people that came out of the fundamentalist evangelical communities, those people that had become disenchanted with all of that, these people that were seeking their own answers, their own truth, and the many of them that were starting to dabble in some of these conspiracy theories about 9/11 and certain other things that happened that were said to be government cover-ups or conspiracies. Now this was the match that really lit the fuse. And little by little, that fire of conspiracy, and it's funny, I was going to say really became ablaze, and I'm just now remembering that Glenn Beck has a show called The Blaze. Coincidence? Maybe not. But it really did ignite this whole thing and really sent it spiraling out of control. And it was so strange to see that over the last, I would say, 10, 12 years, 13 years, as all of this really grew in popularity and the truth movement became so big. It used to be, and I've talked about this in a lot of my shows before, that the evangelical community influenced a lot of churches and influenced the beliefs of a lot of people, even if they weren't, evangelicals. They could have been, Methodists or Catholics or Baptists or, any other denomination. But they were the churches, some churches, many of them, and many individuals were influenced by the evangelicals, especially through the popularity of the televangelists that were so very popular at one time. And again, we're talking about the T.D. Jakes, the Kenneth Copeland, the Pat Robertsons, the John Hagees, all of those guys that were the big money names, Benny Hinn, Jack Van Impe, Hal Lindsey. Now, I personally don't think that Jack Van Impe and Hal Lindsey were, the worst guys in the world. I think they sincerely believed what they preached and, tried to do the best job they could, even though there were, a lot of predictions there that, and Bible interpretations that, just didn't really jive and it didn't really work out the way that they said that it would or thought that it would, but that's neither here nor there. But the point being that, the evangelicals really influenced a lot of people through these popular televangelists. But now it was very interesting because the evangelicals were not really influenced by anybody. I mean, they were pretty much an island unto themselves. We believe what we believe. We teach the, unadulterated, word of God straight from the Bible, literally. So they weren't much interested in hearing what anybody else had to say. But the really interesting thing is that the truther community, as it got so big after that match really lit the fuse with Glenn Beck and Alex Jones and Bill O'Reilly and a lot of the Fox News people that would talk about these kinds of things, everything just really took off. And as it got so big, we started to see, and now see very much so, how the evangelical community and churches are so very influenced by the truther community. Because now it seemed that that satanic panic that they had, during, kind of the 1970s and, in the 80s and, part of the 90s, was really being validated, but in a different way. It became like the continuation of the satanic panic, only being that, oh, now, we understand, that everybody in Washington, all of the politicians are, you know, Satan worshipers, witches, and pedophiles. They're sacrificing and eating babies in the basement of the White House and in their secret bunkers. And, they're doing the same thing in Hollywood, and all these people are connected. It's this web of satanic witches and Freemasons and, secret societies. And, oh, they've been pulling the strings, for forever, since the Garden of Eden. This is Satan's baby, Satan's plan since the Garden of Eden. And his minions are carrying it out very successfully through all of the deception of the elites. And so everything else just really started to fall into place with this philosophy and these ideas. And again, I'm not denying that some of these things don't happen, that there aren't some really weird things that people in politics and Hollywood and the entertainment industry, do, especially when people have money and power and influence. It can get really, really strange with people. But I think a lot of this has really blown itself out of control, blown itself out of proportion. Because I mean, let's look at the influencers that started the truther movement. It started with the evangelicals and the satanic panic and, the end of days. And these people made a lot of claims that were, absolutely preposterous. They predicted the end of the world. This person was the Antichrist, that person was the Antichrist. Those people are satanic. Those people sold their soul to the devil. This one, that, and they were wrong on so many accounts that we can't even tally it all up. How many times they said it was the end of the world, how many times they said Jesus is returning, how many times they said the rapture is coming, how many times they accused people. Oh, the writer of that book is, a witch and a Satanist. Oh, that rock group is a bunch of witches and Satanists trying to pervert our children, and, all the backwards things on the records if you play them backwards. And they were accusing people. Case in point, I was just reading an article probably about a week ago, how Jimmy Page, the guitarist from Led Zeppelin, now yes, he did, dabble quite heavily in the occult back in the day. He was very interested in, Eastern, mysticism and, occult. But there was a Christian magazine that wrote an article that said, yes, the drummer of Led Zeppelin, John Bonham, when he died, he drank too much, he, threw up, he, choked on his own vomit in his sleep and, died. But they also wrote that, yes, this is true that John Bonham, choked on his own vomit and died in his sleep. But while this was happening, Jimmy Page was standing over him doing a satanic ritual. So, they pulled the weirdest things out of the air. just to frighten people, it seemed. And, if they really did believe these things, I don't know what their sources were. What they had, I'm sure, people know the rock band Kiss. Well, they were satanic, Knights in Satan's Service. Some of them were real lunkheads in that band. I had a little bit of a personal association with some people that were in Kiss, and some of them were really nice Christian and Catholic people, and others were just control freaks and egotists, but they were not satanic or Satanists in any way, shape, or form. The same with Iron Maiden. Oh, look at those guys. They're satanic. Well, they're not. They just write songs about a lot of different myths and religions and ideas, including ones that are written in the Bible. They're actually a group of guys that have been always very curious about the spiritual and what happens when you die. What is the meaning of life? They're very inquisitive individuals, especially when they were young. But they were not satanic, they were not witches. So, just a couple examples being thrown out there of how these people would just say things and point and accuse and claim, and it all just fell flat as being untrue. And, evangelical fundamentalist Christianity was the womb that gave birth to the truther community. The people who came out of that womb still carried with them, even though they said they renounced all of that and they were deceived by the religion. They were disenchanted. They were lied to. And, they'd had enough of this kind of religion. But yet they carried a lot of the doctrines with them, a lot of the beliefs. And they also carried with them a lot of the same kind of attitudes. So when they started dabbling in these conspiracy theories, they were already conditioned to start making claims and, predictions about what was going to happen, in the government, to America, in the world, that were unsubstantiated and that never happened. So they were conditioned for that sort of thing. And then comes along someone like Glenn Beck, Alex Jones, all of those individuals, and start really, again, individuals who are somehow very influenced themselves by all of this, being, conservative Republican Christians. And the whole thing just really blows up. And interestingly, that all of that the womb, evangelical Christianity, that all this came out of, suddenly reflected back onto itself, and the two of them became commingled. And this is why we had so many Christians and evangelicals who were really chasing after QAnon and the predictions about Donald Trump and what Donald Trump was supposed to do, who he was supposed to be, and the Trump of God and saving America, and getting rid of all the bad guys across the world and setting us free, and starting a whole new world, that was pretty much a godly theocracy type of thing. I guess that started in America and maybe, spread abroad. But that's why they did it, because these were a lot of people that were conditioned for that sort of thing. Because religion to them just wasn't peace and love and communing with God, loving your neighbor. Religion to them, they were indoctrinated and programmed for so many years. Always look for the end of the world. Always look for the devil. Always look for the problem. Always look for the bad thing that's going to happen, that the devil is going to do. I always said in a lot of evangelical Christianity, It seemed the devil was given a lot more credit and a lot more power than even God himself. I mean, the devil was everywhere, and we if we just looked in the wrong direction and whistled, the devil and his demons were right there to take us down. you know but to get God to even lift a little finger to help us, we had to pray and fast and cry and stand in faith and confess the word, and all these things you had to go through, you know and it still might take you right up to 0 hour, man. It looks like you're going down with the ship before God finally swoops in and does something at the last minute. But whew, wow, he finally came through, but the devil was there 24/7. But that's how we were conditioned to think. So coming out of that womb, this is what religion was to these individuals. Always keep looking for the wrong, always keep looking for the bad, always keep looking for the demonic. Always keep looking for the end of the world. Always keep looking for the deep, dark, demonic. And it really carried over into the truther, woke community. Because that's pretty much what they do. They're always looking for the agenda of, the satanic pedophiles in Washington and in places of power, that's going to lower the boom on all of us one way or another. And I've always asked the question, if we believe in God, if we believe in Christ, if we believe in afterlife, and this world isn't all there is, it's not our real home, as the Bible says, we're, strangers, journeying through this world, and it's not our real home. What are we so worried about what the evil people might do in the end? Even if they succeed for a little while and end up taking a lot of us out before, things get better. What are we so worried about? We're supposed to know where our real home is. We're supposed to know where it is we're going in the end. So why are we so worried? Why are we so convinced we need to stock up on all this food? And there's nothing wrong with having a little supply of food. If things go wonky, I'm definitely for that. But why do we think we need to have these things stored up, and we have to have all these guns and join militias and join groups and get ready to go out there and just blow the bad guy away if he comes to take away our guns or our Bibles or our whatever? I mean, is that what Jesus told us to do? No, not really. But see, that's what coming out of that fundamentalist evangelical womb conditioned people for. And I'm not putting people down saying what a bunch of idiots. No, but if you're beat over the head with that type of thing over and over and over and over for years and years and years, you don't know anything better. I've tried to talk to these people about, simple faith and the love of God and just being at peace. And oh boy, you're deceived. You don't know. They're going to be coming for us, and oh, you're going to take the mark. Oh, they're going to kill you. You're not going to survive. Let them. I'm not going to join them. They want to shoot me, cut my head off, throw me off a cliff. Have at it, bro. you know, I'm really, I'm really not worried about sticking around in this world if that's what it's going to become, a war-torn zone. This group against that group in the end anyway. I mean, that's just my personal opinion. And even if we do end up standing and fighting, in the end for something, I'm still not going to be afraid to die. It is what it is. I don't think we need to spend so much time worrying about it and always looking for the bad. That old saying, energy flows where attention goes. Be careful what you focus on. Didn't Jesus say, with what measure you meet, it shall be measured back to you? Maybe we shouldn't be focusing on all this bad stuff all the time. But we've been trained in the evangelical camps that that's what we needed to do. That was faith. That was being vigilant. That was being a good watchman on the wall. That was being ready for the return of Christ. That was studying to show ourselves approved by always looking for the end and what the bad guys were doing. And so the people that came out of that, they didn't know anything else. As I said in Monday's show, they started looking for the devil under different rocks, a little bit of a different angle. And these conspiracy theories about 9/11 and, other things that I won't mention on the show because some platforms, don't want you to mention these things, but you get the picture. That's where they found their devil. That's where they found their bad guy. That's where they found their new enemy. And then, we had the fringe groups that started springing up talking about these things, making videos on places like YouTube, and, then started doing some, podcasts later on and starting blogs. And then again came Glenn Beck, Alex Jones, and company, and really threw buckets of gasoline on that fire. And it burned far out of control, and here we are. Here we are with over half the country, well, just about half the country in America, and it's affected other countries as well. I know in the UK, I know in Australia. We're not the only ones. We have people that are former evangelical Christians, never really trusted the government. But now look, they're chasing after politicians, they're chasing after faceless political prophets like QAnon, they're chasing after people like Donald Trump, they're chasing after people, political parties. They're wanting to form militias. They're ready. They're ready to kill. I mean, people want to deny the January 6th thing, but look what was happening there. All the crosses, all the Jesus signs, and yet they were erecting a gallows on the Capitol grounds to hang Mike Pence, telling one cop, "You're going to die on your knees. Get his own gun, or get his gun. Kill him with his own gun." A lot of these people were Christians, folks. And we can sit there and try to make believe that none of this is happening, none of it happened. Oh, that was somebody else, that was in our group. But I think we need to open our eyes and realize it is our group. And you listen to some of the rhetoric of these people, you look at some of the actions of these people. And this is what it's become. This is the fire that has been started. And the godfathers of the woke truther movement, they really put in motion a religious political nightmare rather than helping anything. And many of them are becoming what they always said the enemy would become. Now, I'm not going to get into all of that, but I think we need to open our eyes and see that this movement is not the wonderful, godly, jam-packed with truth movement that we think it is, because it is not. And it's not surprising that it's not when you look at the sources that it came from. The evangelical fundamentalist community, satanic panic, accusations and false prophecies. And then on the other end, to bookshelf it in, television personalities, the media, people like Glenn Beck, people like Alex Jones. I mean, do we really think these people would be on TV if some big executive somewhere didn't say, well, hey, we think this is going to draw a crowd? There's already a following for this. People are already looking into these conspiracy theories. People are already distrusting the government. We stand to make a mint and have the ratings go through the roof if we grab up a Glenn Beck and throw him on at 4 o'clock every day. And you know what? They did. And these people made just as many accusations and false prophecies as the evangelical movement that birthed those who eventually became many of the truthers. But now many evangelicals are truthers also. So the whole thing really boomeranged. But if you look at the sources of where all of this came from and how it started, it's not surprising. It's not surprising that it's turned into what it's turned into. False prophecies, false accusations, misinformation, division, hatred, accusing our brother. Because isn't that what the religion we came out of did? We left it because we got tired of the two-faced hypocrites judging everybody, trying to scare everybody into accepting their doctrine. But now look what we're doing. Judging everybody, trying to scare everybody into accepting what we now believe. It's become the monster that it hated and resented the most. And the sad thing about it is that there's still people that will listen to this show and the last show and just go along YouTube and, hit their little thumbs down or, make some snarky comment. Because either they can't see or they don't want to see. But this show and the last one is as much truth and honest perspective and history on this movement that you're ever going to get anywhere. Now, I always say I don't claim to be the smartest guy in the world, but you know what? I'm 54 years old. I lived through, the 70s. I lived through the 80s. I lived through the 90s. And I've seen a few movements begin. And I've seen exactly where they came from, just like I did the podcast years back, and I think it's still on YouTube, talking about this whole idea of the holidays. Oh, those holidays, they're pagan, they're evil. I saw exactly when that started in Protestant Christianity, and I know exactly where it came from. I was there, I saw it, I witnessed it. And now it's something that's everywhere, and people don't even know the spurious sources and the very spurious, once upon a time frowned upon religious sources that all of that stemmed from. I saw it. I saw when it was birthed in the evangelical community, and it spread through Protestant Christianity. And I also saw and remember exactly how this truther woke community began. With the people leaving these religions, being lost, dejected, afraid, they didn't know where to go, they second-guessed themselves. Are they going to hell? They left the religion. And then what they started dabbling in on the internet. Oh, these conspiracy theories. And these conspiracy theories with the Christian bent. And then little by little, it starts to gain popularity. And Shazam, the good old um, news media, capitalizes on it by giving us wonderful personalities like Glenn Beck, Alex Jones, Bill O'Reilly, Sean Hannity, Brett Baer, all these guys that, talk about these things. And you don't think that they didn't know it was popular? I mean, come on. But, folks, that's my roundup on this conversation. Once again, I hope you got something out of it today, and I hope it'll make you think. I really appreciate you listening. Stay safe, stay well, stay in the light, and I'll talk to you next time here on the Spirit Side.